In 5, 4, 3.
Hey, everybody. Mentor Podcast Set, Human Connection, Episode 7. I'm going to have to start out this episode with saying, even as a mentor, even as someone who's trying to create human connection for everybody, today is one of those days for me. Last couple weeks have been a couple weeks for me, challenging. And somewhat a feeling of loneliness and not sure why. Everything in the world that I've ever dreamed of is happening, and we're doing it, and I'm pushing through each day and doing it, and yet there's this undertone sense of loneliness, and I don't know what it is. So I started out by saying that because I said I was going to be authentic. So today we're going to have Brian Cabell. Introduce yourself.
Hi, gang. I'm the one who's over here on the board, switching. Sometimes you hear me. You hear me count in sometimes. My name's Brian. I work here at ETA, help out with what I can on Mentor Empire and just about everything, I guess.
Better believe it. All-around guy.
You need me on.
So today we're going to talk, probably going to go through, I have a list of 24 questions. 24 questions. I think you have the list, Brian. Actually, I don't have a list.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, we're going to go more delving into the history of Chad here in a little bit because we've got a couple episodes. And why are you the interviewer? Who are you? You know, people might have some questions.
I understand that. I don't know either, so hopefully we can get through these together. But I will tell you this. So when I say everything is happening and dreams are coming true, this is next week, April 1st. I made these little sticker sheets for the kids. One of my lifelong dreams is coming true. I've always dreamed of doing motivational speaking. When I was young, I used to follow all the greats. And so I was in and around that environment quite a bit, and it was quite inspirational. So this week, one of the high schools is having a color run, and there's a suicide prevention assembly happening, and they have asked me if I would take 10 minutes and speak to the class about how to have empathy and compassion and build up others inside of the high school with the high school students. And when I tell you, maybe that's why I'm a little down. Maybe I'm so nervous that something's actually happening.
Could be.
Could be. I'm nervous. It's something I've wanted to do my entire life, and it's happening. So I'll keep you apprised on what happens when we come next episode with that. But the whole intent for this podcast was to provide helpful stories that could maybe deter the youth from taking certain paths or directions that I did. And the reason that's important to me is our decisions at every age determine our outcomes. It's not anybody else that determines them, it's our decisions. And I thought by sharing some stories, my story as well as other stories could benefit many people. So the authenticity and the honesty is coming from that vein. So today, I'm going to let Brian fire away with some questions. None of this is obviously pre-recorded. We haven't planned this.
Maybe we should have.
Maybe we should have. Yeah, I'm rambling. So the good news is it's episode 7. Let's learn a little bit about Brian, a little bit about some of my story and why I'm here, why you're listening to this podcast, and how it could be helpful moving forward, especially if you have teenagers in the house or you're working with the younger generation. That can be a little more challenging because at those younger ages, we know everything and nobody can help us. So Brian, let's fire away. Let's see if we can get started, and let's go.
Most definitely. Well, I just learned. I thought you were born and raised, or at the very least moved here young, but it was a little later in your life. So where'd you start it all off? Where were you born at, actually?
So I was born in Wairika, California, about an hour north of Redding, California, which I grew up in Redding until I was about 10 years old.
Okay.
And then moved to San Diego for a while. Actually moved quite a few places.
Okay.
San Diego, Virginia Beach, Vermont, Hawaii, short stints everywhere. But then ultimately ended up back in Redding, California to graduate high school. So outside of running around a little bit, mostly Northern California, Southern California, and then ultimately here to the desert.
Okay. Well, have you ever lived anywhere east of Las Vegas?
East. Which way is east? Yes.
It's that way.
Yes.
Just,
Yeah.
just that way, right?
I
over
lived in
there.
I lived in Vermont
Oh, okay.
and Virginia Beach, Chesapeake High School. Yeah.
I'll be darned. Okay.
Yep.
Well, did you have a favorite out of all those different spots that you guys were moving around to?
Absolutely. So, Redding in Northern California was fantastic. Up, it's about 10 or 11 years old, but the more formidable years, I think I spent in San Diego. So I'd say that San Diego is definitely the most enjoyable. Grew up in Tierra Santa, just outside of La Jolla,
Okay.
and
Or
there,
La Jolla, as some people might know it.
La Jolla. Yeah, there is where I found surfing, and that's what stuck with me and still does today.
When's the last time you've actually gotten out and surfed?
May, my birthday of last year. Always go down at least once a year. Most of the time twice, sometimes 3 times, but it's been a busy year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair deal. So 1 through 10, mostly in Reading. You started moving around.
Yeah.
Why did you guys start moving around so much?
So if you watch my Taylor Fund video or Taylor Foundation video, it'll tell you a little bit about what happened. But my parents got a divorce at 10 years old, and that kind of set a new direction. And my mother went one way, and my father the other. My mother went to San Diego, and my father stayed in Redding. So I went to San Diego with my mom. So that's how I ended up there, and that's when a lot of things start changing. And so that next 4 or 5 years was instrumental in quite a few things that happened, both positive and negative, really.
Okay.
So, yeah. I'm doing this more like interview style, which probably isn't the greatest, but you're doing a great job, Bry.
I'm juggling cats over here. I'm trying. Well, so take me then into, I guess we're in junior high school, right about. Any
Yes.
big impactful stuff around that time?
Yeah, so De Portola High School. What a great place up in Tierra Santa. So yeah, the parents get a divorce at 10. Life happens. Mom heads south. I end up down there. Mom has a new boyfriend, Morgan. I'm actually going to say his name because he was one hell of a guy. Absolutely.
Yeah, you
And,
talked about. I didn't know his name, but you talked about him a little bit before.
Yeah, Morgan was fantastic. So I show up down in San Diego, and it's all fun. Everything's fun time. I'm 10, almost 11 years old. I might be gone from the paper route and my little sister and my dad, but there's so much excitement that I really don't catch on to it at that young of an age, right? It's different. It's not, you don't know whether it's sad or you don't know what effect it's going to have on you later in life
Yeah.
unless in reflection. But it was all fun. It was BMX and surfing and new bikes and new friends and new places to stay. Our neighbors, I'll never forget, they had a zip line in their backyard, a Mormon family. There's about 14 kids there. So it was me and 14 kids next door, which was a whole lot of fun.
Well, you guys had like a little gang pretty much set up then, huh?
Yeah, they had bamboo fields that you could run through, like literally bamboo fields. And El Cajon was where we were at the time. It was awesome. So many great memories, from there. And then we moved from El Cajon into Tierra Santa, so 5th to 6th grade, into Tierra Santa in 6th grade. And I did De Portola Middle School for 3 years, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
I'm not familiar with Tierra Santa. Where's that at?
Tierra Santa stands for the island in the hills. And there's an old stadium. It was Jack Murphy Stadium at the time. Yep, and just up from Jack Murphy Stadium, about 20 minutes up the freeway, Tierra Santa set up on the hills on the east side of the 15. Yeah.
Nice.
So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade there. Formed my relationships with my best friends at the time, Josh and Josh. There was 2 Joshes. So that was good fun. I think that's those years when you find your reality and puberty hits and you find ladies as well, right? So those were those years. So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Funny story about 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, actually. When you get in trouble to school, what do they call those?
RPCs,
RPCs or like write-ups or suspension letters or whatever they are. You didn't actually get suspended in junior high, but you'd get some sort of like write-up or ticket or something. It's kind of like a cop giving you a speeding ticket. I remember I was late into my seventh grade year, early 8th grade year, and the counselor had called my mom and I had 52 write-ups.
Oof.
52. So if you got a youngster that's in school that can't just seem to get through school, something's going on, you can't figure it out, 72. And I couldn't even tell you...
Wait, 72 or 52?
Or sorry, 52.
Okay.
But I couldn't even tell you why. I was just acting out. Class clown. Had to have fun. Had to be the center of attention. Acting out a lot. And ultimately had a teacher there. Actually, this is pretty deep. So had a teacher there. You know what's funny? I think legally I can say it. Yeah. But I had a teacher there. His name was...
Statute of limitations sort of deal?
It must be, right? Like, I mean, and the crime was perpetrated on me at the end of the day, so...
Oh, well then, yeah.
Then does it really matter, right?
Yeah, you can share.
Yeah, so there was a teacher there. He started a Kids with No Fathers group.
Okay.
In hindsight, right? How predatory is that?
It definitely has a whole lot of potential to be that way.
Right?
Yeah.
So he starts this group, and I have a bunch of friends, and we'll leave their names out. There's probably 5 or 6 of us, and we all have amazing single mothers who are trying to make it through and take care. And now, in hindsight, looking back and watching other single mothers raise children, no easy task whatsoever.
No. It's not even for 2 parents, let alone just one.
Right? Yeah. So he starts this group. It's all fun and games. He's taking some of the kids like Knott's Berry Farms and SeaWorlds and we're
oh God, you got everything down there. There's the San Diego Zoo. There's the Wild Animal Park too.
Yeah,
there's that whole row of just museums, like all in line right down there.
Right.
It's gorgeous too over there.
San Diego's hot.
Yeah.
The place is on fire. So yeah, he starts that group. These kids are doing this, and taking us over to his house. We're staying at his house. He has some daughters, right? And we're just finding out who we are. So that's happening, and again, like I said, playing tennis, and essentially, I woke up in the middle of the night, being raped, being assaulted by this man.
Jesus.
Right? I must have been 13. I don't know, I blocked some of it out, right? But that was a very important moment as someone you trusted or someone who was in a guiding position, a teacher for that matter, to take advantage of somebody in that nature, right? At the time, I pretended to go back to, pushed it away, pretended to go back to sleep, woke up the next morning, went and played tennis, and essentially told him, if you ever touch me again, I'll kill you.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's
like I knew it happened.
Tough to confront.
Yeah. I confronted it the next morning. I said, you ever touch me again, I'll kill you. I didn't understand it at that time. All I knew was I was angry.
Yeah.
And I do remember waiting 4 or 5 days before I told my mother. I ended up telling my mother. She ended up taking the proper actions. And ultimately, he got in trouble and found out it was multiple kids involved. No one had said anything yet. I was the first one that had said something. Yeah. And that opened a slew of problems. And that's a big deal. And I want people to remember that, because I always tell you the truth will set you free and honesty will set you free, right? Most people are going to hold that kind of stuff inside. That's so personal. It's still personal to this day.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of, like, for victims of crimes like that, there's a lot of, like, shame that they feel like you'll see that recurring theme through speaking to them. Yeah. So they feel like they're even at fault potentially in some manner or way too. And it's like, no, obviously not. But it's so... I think that's the worst crime. I think it's worse than murder.
I would agree.
Because somebody, they die at that point and then they have to just keep living somehow.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny you say that. So being young and not understanding it, but knowing this, that something went wrong and somebody took something from me that wasn't theirs to take. I think it's very important for the world to know that, and for any kids out there, young adult, anything that's been taken, speak up.
Yeah.
Just speak up, because I promise you there's an entire world out there that's going to protect you. There is an entire world out there that's going to protect you, but most people like hide it,
Yeah.
or they're scared of it.
Well, and I mean, speaking up is also potentially saving people in the future.
You're going to save a ton of people.
Because this isn't the first time
Yeah.
these people have done it, and it's
No.
it's usually not the first victim.
Yeah, there's predators everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So that happened, all that came out, and I moved on with my life, 13, 14, 15, 16. Of course, what came after that? The introduction to drugs,
Yeah.
right? All right, let's smoke a little weed. All right, let's do a little cocaine. All right, let's do a little this. And then it started happening because I wasn't dealing with what had happened. I was just trying to cover it up. So,
Or even escape your own life to some degree.
yeah, and you know what's really weird is at the time, I didn't feel it. I didn't think about it. Like, it didn't haunt me. I mean, when I say it doesn't haunt me, it haunted me as fact as if I like pictured or even tried to picture it today, it creeps me out.
Yeah.
Right? It gives me the ooby-joobies. Like, I can feel touch. Like, it gets weird. So you try and cover that and stay away from it. But it changed who I was. And we'll go through between there and 25 years old. And that ride between 13 and 25 is the reason we're sitting in the studio today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is because those things change people. And it's happened to a lot of people. And for years I let it define who I was. But no longer do I let it define. It's just something that happened to me as part of a story. And there's probably people out there right now that are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to you, or I'm so sorry. And don't be. Don't be sorry. And let me tell you why. I had to find a way to make it my fault. I took this class here in Las Vegas, actually. It's the Choice Centers, if anybody's ever heard of them. Became a little cultish for me at the end, so I kind of backed out. But I did go through, somebody who cared about me put me through the class and paid for it.
Okay.
And in that class, quite a few years ago, I found a way. They say, take whatever's happened to you and find a way to make it your fault so you can stop playing the victim and blaming other people. And for the first time, almost 40 years old, for the first time in my life, I laid down and meditated on that timeline of my life
Okay.
and tried to find out how it was my fault. And everybody kept saying in my head, like, nah, it's not you, Chad, it's a victim. There's truly, right, that was assault, you're a victim, it was in no way your fault. And that's true, except I still found a way to make it my fault. And this is important and very personal as well. And I'm telling this authentically and openly so that people understand that the truth will set you free. Remember those 40-something write-ups I got in junior high?
Yeah.
What if I told you one of those write-ups may have sent the wrong message to that teacher?
I could see that.
So there was a day in class that I wanted to be the class clown, and somehow I must have felt just comfortable enough. Now, I didn't think far enough into that, but I must have felt just comfortable enough that one day I decided to jump up on the back counter of the class and drop my pants and moon the entire class.
Okay.
And in that meditation at Choice Center, when I was thinking back, Chad, how could this have been your fault? How could you have put yourself in a position for this to happen? How? I came to that moment and I said, Chad, had you not been an ass, had you not stood up on the back, literally, had you not stood on the back of that counter and dropped your pants in front of the whole class with this specific teacher in class, maybe he wouldn't have thought there was an opening.
Yeah.
How crazy is that to think?
That's pretty well. I understand logically.
Mm-hmm.
It still seems bizarre and odd. But like that, oh, he sees you as somebody who's a little bit more free and open with your body sort of thing. So.
Right. So the messages we send as people with our body language, with our actions, with our words, with our thoughts, everybody is responding to us in those ways. And if there is a predator in the world that's out there, remember that those things our potential.
Yeah.
Carry yourself appropriately. A lot of people say, to tell girls to dress a certain way so that guys don't look at them. I know there's a whole argument over what that is and whether it is right, whether it's wrong. I should be able to dress how I want. Stay away from the girl part of it. Let's just talk about my story.
Yeah.
Right? It happened to me. So that could lead you in that direction. So I tell that story that's extremely personal to me so that everybody understands that there is a reason that I do this. One, I'm with you. Predators, number one, hands down, probably get me more emotional than anything in this world today. And I do everything in my power to ensure that that never happens around my circle of influence whatsoever.
Yeah.
Number two, when I decided to find a reason that it was my fault, when I decided to stop blaming somebody else for what happened in my life, whether it's right or wrong, I was able to overcome the guilt, the shame.
That helped
and
you process everything
it helped me
from
process.
the emotional standpoint, things like that.
Right. So there hopefully is some power behind that for people, right? And that's something that I teach today is we are not victims. We want to be victims because it's the easy way out. It's the story we tell ourselves so that we can continue being or doing the things that we do. But if we really take a deep thought, a deep look into what we're doing or how we're doing it, it really is all under our control. And we're not
I feel like
victims.
all is a very strong word there, though.
Yeah, fair enough. You're really good at balancing me that way.
I try.
So, excuse me. Now that was, I think, strong enough for episode number 7, so it kind of set a precedence of
Yeah. Well, and there's been hints in the past episodes of
trauma.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
So I
good
think
point.
that clears that up a little bit for people.
It clears that up, and that's when things changed. So from that age on, until the day that I stepped out of federal prison, I was on a warpath. So for anybody watching this, when you see a youth that is disconnected in some ways, shape or form, the thing that I always go to, number one, is find out what the actual issue is. Because the actual
The root
issue
cause.
and what it's representing itself as are completely different, almost always.
Yeah.
And the two, mental illness, drug addiction, whatever the cover-up is, comes back to some sort of trauma that happened that you wouldn't even know. So that got me through junior high.
Yeah, and then high school you start doing the self-medicating.
Dabbling in the self-medicating and the drugs.
What was it
Not
like?
even knowing that I was.
Yeah.
I wasn't saying, hey, I'm going to do this because I feel ashamed or guilty. It was an undertone. It was almost like subconsciously. I didn't want to know who I was. Do you know how many times I questioned myself whether I was gay or not through high school?
Oh, yeah, gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Why was I overly active with girls in high school? Maybe I was trying to prove something to myself. I don't know.
Okay.
But it's a conversation I have with, and I'm not even sure anymore what the right words are to say because I don't care. But I have a lot of gay friends still.
Yeah.
And while I'm not uncomfortable around them and I fully accept who they are, there was a long time that I didn't. There was a long time that I didn't.
Strongly, or like there's just always was an undertone?
No,
to some
there was
degree?
there was a duality to it. I always questioned myself about who I was, but I had a bit of anger and resentment. I didn't like gay guys.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Just kind of associating homosexuality with
rape.
Yeah.
Right?
'Cause
So
that was your personal experience.
because that's your personal experience. So that took a while to overcome till I became confident enough in myself. And I'll tell you, one of the moments is I was in high school. I just got out of high school, just after high school. I went back down to this guy's house in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Found it, took my best friend, and went down there to confront him.
No shit.
Yeah,
Well, speaking of your friends, I mean, did your friends? You told your mom about 4 or 5 days later,
yeah.
and then I mean, there was other victims, so I'm guessing your friends kind of found out through the grapevine with it, or did you individually speak with them, or as a group, or did they just find out through the community?
You know what, Brian? That's a great question. I don't even know that any of us ever talked about it,
Yeah.
even to this day.
Well, do you feel like they knew though? Could that potentially have been part of why you acted, why you did in pursuing girls in high school? Was it prove it to yourself, but also prove it to this community who found out about your trauma
Yeah.
and experience with that? And so you're like, well, I got to prove it to me. I got to prove it to the world, sort of deal.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is later on in life, one time I'd kissed a guy to check,
Okay.
and that was my closing statement on that.
Yeah.
Was I questioned myself my whole life. I must have been in the late 20s, early 30s. I told my wife about this story. She laughs to this day. But
Was it that rodeo guy?
like I'm going to tell you who it was, but that's funny. We'll leave that as a question mark. But it was quick and in passing, and it was purposeful actually. Like I was extremely intoxicated and high and all the things, and it was just must have been a moment of I need to know, and I did, and I realized I didn't, which is the moment that I realized that it may be genetic or it may be inherent. It's not a choice.
Well, yeah. I fully believe
But I never knew that.
that people are just born that way.
But I can actually say that I would know that you can know, it is either you are or you're not. That's a real thing.
Well, there's
I
even
mean-
arguments with that, with like the Kinsey scale of sexuality.
Yeah.
How it's all just a spectrum
Yeah.
sort of deal.
Yeah, so it was a challenge. It was a challenge. So from 13, 14 years old and the drugs in high school, and then changing high schools, 3, 4 different high schools.
Okay.
Virginia Beach.
So who was in Virginia Beach that went out there and was living and doing a little bit of high school?
My mom was in Virginia Beach.
Is
She
family
was-
from back there or something?
Nope. It was a new, I don't know if she ever got married. I don't know if she married him or not. Yes, she did. She married him on the beach in La Jolla. Yeah.
Okay.
Mark. Navy SEAL.
What was the name of the stepdad from earlier, though? Is that the same
Morgan.
gentleman? Morgan.
Morgan was before Mark.
Okay.
Great guy. Morgan was great. Morgan was great. Mark was a little different. Nonetheless, in hindsight, looking back on life, and I had this conversation with my mom when I went out and talked to her and took all my life and dumped it out. I was like, I forgive everything. You were just young and doing what you were doing, and maybe you didn't know what was happening, right? Like there's a lot of these things that I held against her for a lot of years.
Yeah.
I went out and just kind of forgave and let it all go. And in looking back, what had happened was, it was Rod, and it was Morgan, and it was Mark, and it was Bruce Lumley. Wow, Bruce and Lawrence. Like, I could go, John. Like I could go through. These men would come into my mom's life. They'd come into my life,
Yeah.
and then when they'd leave her life, they'd leave my life.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, looking at it, she wasn't intentionally doing it. She never meant any harm to me, right?
Yeah.
But I think ultimately that was my constant search for mentors. Because I was constantly looking for someone to follow.
Well, and that's hard for a kid too, just to have
Yeah.
something in your life for a while, then
Yeah.
it's gone.
Yeah. So, yeah, high school, bounced around to high schools, and ultimately I disagreed with my living situation at home with Mark and my mom, and got a little violent, and I decided that I wasn't gonna stay around for it. And I packed up my car at 16 years old and drove from Virginia back to what I knew, which was Northern California.
Okay.
I believe at that time I took my grandma with me, and then said I want to do this on my own at 16.
Huh.
And
Well, did you move back in with your dad, or you were like straight up on your own?
yeah, there was a short time that I moved in with my dad, who was living there still at that time. And then I feel like he wasn't there anymore. He went somewhere else. And then I was there alone, and I was couch surfing and living on different people's couches to finish off high school, which is kind of going to lead into why I want to go talk about this, or being able to talk at the school about the suicide prevention stuff. Is that was the year, 12th grade was the year that I attempted suicide. Now listen, I'm really good at stuff. Like if I'm going to do something, I do it all the way.
Okay.
You know this about
except
me.
for this one thing, obviously. 'cause
Except
you're
for this
here.
one thing
Yeah.
called suicide. And you know what? A good thing.
Yeah.
A good thing.
What
But it was a cry for help at that time, obviously.
is it a little too deep to ask what
No.
your methodology was?
No, not at all. And actually, I'll tell so many stories, but this is another really good one. Is I was in my senior year. Mom and dad were neither in the state, and I was in high school, and I wasn't going to finish. I was still a problem.
Okay.
I still wasn't going to finish school, ditching whatever it was in high school. And I remember showing up in the counselor's office, and it was an old school on the top of the hill, foothill, Redding, California, up on the hill, and it was like columns in the front, and the windows were like old shutters with the glass panes, but the windows opened out into like the lawn.
Okay.
So they're probably 4 or 5 foot off the lawn. It wasn't a real tall building. And I'm in my counselor's office, and he's telling me, Chad, you're not going to graduate high school. And I think just a week before that, there was hints of it, and I had talked to my mother about it, and she's like, do me a favor and just graduate high school. And I was like, okay, no problem. And then a week later, I'm in the counselor's office, and he's like, you're not going to graduate high school.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, so I'm not going to graduate high school. I'm going to let my mom down. I'm going to let my dad down. I don't think I was thinking about myself at the time. I was misplaced and misunderstood and all the rest of the things. A 16-year-old, 17-year-old. Oh, what was I, 18? I don't even know I was. Probably close to 18 at that time. And I remember looking the counselor in his eyes, seeing that the window was open, looking back at him, and I said, you don't have to worry about me anymore. And I jumped out the window of the school, ran down to the lower parking lot, got in my car, drove to a bonfire spot where we used to hang out that overlooks the high school up over Shasta, pulled out a blanket, threw it on my hood of the car, blasted Tool. One of my best friends always listened to Tool. It was like the hardest music I had heard at that point.
Okay.
Blasted some Tool, got up on the hood, took a pocket knife, slit my wrist, laid down, and went to sleep.
Huh.
I woke up when the music stopped. The car battery died. And that was the moment I realized you are not very good at this. It was
You haven't mastered this suicide thing, you know?
how
Gosh.
how lucky am I, and what one hell of a cry for help. I didn't even know what help I needed.
Yeah.
I was just lost. Don't ask me why, but I did. And then I look at everything that's happened between that moment and today, and go have this talk at a high school and talk to kids
Yeah.
about that. It's important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're at a good spot here to kind of take a rest until we do another
Is
one
that
of
too
these.
much?
No, it was, it was a good chunk and gave some good history, but we'll get into
Nice.
another round. We'll do Chad in Vegas and
Yeah.
how that all culminated into a fun experience at a self-storage locker.
Yeah. And to all those who are watching, I know that was probably pretty intense. It is for me, and it's extremely, I wouldn't say emotional anymore. I'm in much better control of who I am and what I am now.
Yeah.
And people used to use that against me all of the time. They would take those weaknesses and play on them, but that doesn't happen anymore.
Does it feel like it happened to even a different person?
No.
Like, cause like,
Well,
yeah. I'll think of some stuff in history where it's like, oh, that wasn't me. It was
Yeah.
me, but like that's young Brian. That doesn't.
yeah, you change.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we were all judged by what happened to us when we were kids or what we did when we were teenagers, this would be a different world.
Yeah.
You change over time. I think every decade you change.
Thank
But
God
yeah,
we didn't have any of this stuff until
Yeah.
until our late teens, early 20s with, social media and whatnot.
yeah. And it's a little crazy out there now. I can't wait to have some of the youth on today and understand what it's like today, because it was
For sure.
different back then. It's different today. But what I want to know is, I want to be authentic and I want to put it out there so that people understand why I do what I do, and why it's important to me. And hopefully with that, we can actually help and drive some change and get this younger generation to at least listen to some stories and know that they're not alone.
Yeah.